Having a blog is like a dairy, and if you've never been a dairy farmer, it means there's no vacations, you never get a day off, and there's always work ahead of you. And then the next morning it starts all over again. And that's really the way blogging is. And so, yes, everything you see, you look at from a new lens. Is there some way to comment on this that will make my readers happy? One reason I started blogging was I wanted to say things I couldn't say in my classroom. And I wanted to be able to say them to the world, and I couldn't go into my classroom and be one-sided or just talk about current policy or come out for one president over the other. And so I thought a blog was a way to give me a voice in areas that I wasn't comfortable in the standard academic garb. But as you get over there, you realize that you don't have the freedom you think you have, because once you get there, people expect you to be an academic. I realized that people really were looking for credible information, not necessarily things they agreed with, but credible people. And I know economics, I know the people who are credible, I know who you should listen to, I know who you shouldn't, at least I have my own opinion about that. And so I try to provide a service. The aggregation is more than aggregation, it's also filtering. And I think the filtering part's as important as the aggregation, because I only bring things, or I try to only bring things, you make mistakes, that are credible, that say something important. Someone told me something right at the beginning about blogs, which was talk about what you know. Because there's plenty of people out there doing politics, there's plenty of people out there doing all sorts of things. They're going to do it better than you do, so you need to talk about what you know and do what you do best. And so I've tried to do that and really bring a full spectrum of economics, really focus on monetary, macro, and fiscal policy. Most of my academic works have been about how changes in Federal Reserve policy affect the economy. So when we get to those issues, I really feel, and sometimes it works against you. You feel like, I have something to say here, and sometimes you think, I should have something to say, and I don't, and you feel sort of guilty because that is your area. You do look for economics in everything, and you tend to find it. So I started almost exactly 4 years ago, March 5th, and it was after the last election. And I was really displeased with the state of the economic discourse prior to that election. And that's really what motivated me to start blogging. It's a very different medium where you put out things that are sort of half-baked for comment, and you bat it around between all the blogs, and you hope that between us all we can come up with a policy that's much better. And so the groupthink aspect of it, I think, is really important. But it is really hard to get over the notion that I can't say something wrong. But you're also pressed for speed, and so you have no choice but to sometimes go out with things that aren't fully developed. And I've learned to say that. You know, I'm not real sure about this, but here's my thoughts for the moment, and hopefully more will follow. What you're seeing is there's two schools in economics, and on blogs we've seen a lot of fights between the Chicago school, the New Keynesian, and others. And so when the public looks in, it gives the impression that we don't know what we're talking about. It's because they've never been in a seminar room and see the way theory is made, and we're rough on each other, even in seminar rooms. And bringing that out in the public, I think it's been good because the public can see the policy as it develops, they can help comment on it, but it's also exposed the inner fights that we have, and I think it's led to some undermining of the confidence in the profession. And so I think there's economics and economics bloggers need to think about how we present ourselves to the public. What makes it hard is to write in a way that the general public can understand, but yet still adds value to your colleagues. And it takes a knack to do that. You know, Paul Krugman's good at that. Some people are really good at that, writing in a way that everyone can understand, but you're still making important points to your professional colleagues, or you're qualifying things in a way that there's nuances there that the public might not pick up, but they have to be there. You're talking about trade or something like that. These little nuances have to be there, or your colleagues are going to jump all over you. So I write for a fairly broad-based audience, but I keep in mind that the audience is very diverse. I never ever expected to have more than 100 people a day, and so part of it that comes back is just the excitement every day that it's working, and it's just fun. And I like economics, I like talking about it, I like teaching people about it. And so I view it as a teaching role, and in a way to interact with the public directly, to tell them that, look, what you're hearing here or hearing there isn't right. That's not what economists think, that's not what they believe. We believe this other thing, and these things are controversial, these things aren't, and those sorts of ideas. And so I view it mainly as a way of educating the world. We've almost been like morticians in the past, in the sense that things happen and then we go and do an autopsy later and we say, gee, this is what went wrong, and here's how you can fix it next time, and here's the medicine that will work. In this crisis, and especially on blogs, we're having to act more like a doctor. And so the patient shows up in your office and says, hey, I'm sick, what do we do? And so you look to your models and you try to use these blogs as a way of answering those questions and giving policy advice or commenting on the policy that's coming out. So I think what we've learned then is that the economy doesn't necessarily self-correct, that it can build up pressures. The financial sector in particular seems to be where those pressures build up. And when the financial sector blows up and all our banks start failing, that's when you get Great Depression type things, or what we saw in the 1800s, or the S&L crisis and that sort of thing. And I think those really have a potential to create great damage in the economy. Other types of shocks I'm not so worried about, and I think the economy can pretty well absorb those themselves. The Fed can probably take care of that if the economy can't take care of itself. But when it comes to the financial sector and these bubbles, I think we have something to worry about. So I think the profession needs to learn. I was talking about this to a class the other day. We don't, and this goes back to this doctor thing. The patient comes and it looks like there's something wrong. You know, give me a checkup, and you look at them. What are the signs of a bubble? What should economists be looking for? Can we identify a bubble? If we can we do something about it and prevent these kinds of breakdowns? So in the short run, my biggest worry is just getting this economy back on track, getting it back to full employment, getting it stable again. So it's what we'd call stabilization policy. What I'm most worried about with the stabilization policy is that when we're all done with it, we won't pay it off. And so if you do stabilization policy right, in a trough, you spend money, you fill the trough, and you shave the peak by raising taxes or cutting spending to fill that trough. And I'm really worried that we're so good at passing out the goodies, but when it comes time to go on the diet later, we're not so good at keeping our commitment to lose weight during the good times. And if we don't do that, our budget problem is going to persist. And when you add into it the Medicare problem through rising healthcare costs, then we've got to worry about rising interest rates and lower growth and all those sorts of things. So our short run and our long run prospects are somewhat intertwined in that way. If we don't do the stabilization policy right, it's going to cost us in the long run, and it's going to contribute to the bigger problem in the long run is really our healthcare costs and getting those under control. My own view is this recession, this event that we've had, is going to have a bigger impact on the profession than that people probably realize right now. We're going to look back and say our models were inadequate, they need to be changed, we didn't predict this coming, we didn't see it coming when it did happen. We looked in our tool bag for ways to manage it, and they weren't there. And so I think this will generate a whole lot of work, and hopefully we'll be able to identify these things better and have better policies on the shelf.